Hello Internet, welcome back to Tech Tactics. Today we're diving into a head-to-head comparison that many of you have been waiting for. We're taking a look at the legendary EVGA GTX 1070, released all the way back in 2016. We're putting it to the test in 2025, 9 years later. The system used to test the GTX 1070 includes an Intel i7-13700K, power limited to 125 watts due to the Thermalright Assassin King 120 SE. Also, we're using an MSI Z790 motherboard and 32GB of DDR5 RAM. For today's video, the GTX 1070 is the only limiting factor we're focusing on. So, stick around as we break down its performance, value and whether it's still worth considering in today's market. But before we dive into the good stuff, here's a quick word from our sponsor. Discount prices on Windows 11 CD keys. Visit g2a.com for all the keys you need. Powered by Nvidia's Pascal architecture, the GTX 1070 represented a major advancement in GPU technology. It comes equipped with 8GB of GDDR5 RAM, a base clock of 1607 MHz, and boost speeds reaching up to 1797 MHz. With 64 ROPS and a memory bandwidth of 256.3 GB per second, it offers solid performance for its class. The card features 1920 CUDA cores and a modest 150 watt power draw. Officially, it supports resolutions up to 7680 by 4320 at 60Hz. That's 8K on paper. However, in real-world gaming scenarios, trying to run modern titles at 8K will result in more of a slideshow than playable performance. So what do these specs mean in 2025? The GPU landscape has evolved dramatically. Modern graphics cards now offer real-time ray tracing, AI-driven upscaling like DLSS, and significantly higher core and memory counts. Efficiency has also improved, delivering much more power performance per watt and easily handling 4K gaming and beyond. With next-gen consoles and the latest PC games pushing graphics and physics to new heights, the GTX 1070 is showing its age. While Pascal was a powerhouse in its day, today it's best suited now for esports titles and older AAA games. In Fallout 4, the GTX 1070 manages an average of 82 FPS, with 1% low of 60 FPS and a 0.1% low of 35 FPS. Up next is Red Dead Redemption 2, which first launched in 2018. Even after 8 years, the game remains visually impressive, especially at 1080p resolution with the balanced graphics preset, motion blur disabled, AMD FSR enabled, sharpening set to 100% and running on the Vulkan Graphics API. Now, let's switch things up and talk about pricing and availability. When the GTX 1070 first launched back in 2016, it hit the shelves at £399 in the UK and $379 in the US. Firmly positioned in the mid-range segment, it quickly became a favourite among gamers. Now, fast forward to 2025 and the GTX 1070 is still relatively easy to find on the used market. While scoring one in excellent condition can be a bit tricky due to its age, they're definitely still out there. I actually managed to grab this almost mint condition card on eBay for just £90, including the original box, all the extras and even a big poster. Honestly, I think it's a pretty solid deal. In terms of performance, Red Dead Redemption 2 delivers an impressive average of 76 FPS, with 1% lows at 55 FPS and 0.1% lows at 51 FPS. Up next is The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, running at native 1080p resolution on the low graphics preset. I'm currently enjoying this new AAA title from Naughty Dog Studios, built on their in-house game engine which has undergone major upgrades since Uncharted 4. This engine powers both the PlayStation 4 version and the visually enhanced, performance-optimized remaster for PlayStation 5. The PC version, developed by Nixxes and Iron Galaxy, uses the same engine, offering a wide range of graphics, customization options, and support for advanced upscaling technologies like Intel XeSS, Nvidia DLSS 3, and AMD FSR 3.1. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered averages 91 FPS with 1% lows at 65 FPS and 0.1% lows at 55 FPS. Not bad at all for a brand new game running a 9-year-old GPU. Next up we have the Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remastered, running at 1080p on low graphics settings with motion blur and depth of field turned off. AMD FSR upscaling is enabled and set to balance mode, and Nvidia Reflex is also turned on. Beyond gaming, productivity tasks like video editing and 3D rendering are also key indicators of GPU performance. In applications such as DaVinci Resolve, the GTX 1070 holds its own, handling standard editing tasks smoothly. However, when it comes to rendering, it fails behind newer GPUs that benefit from dedicated hardware cores designed for these workloads. The GTX 1070 is quite power efficient compared to newer GPUs. With the TDP of 150 watts in Oblivion Remastered, the 1070's power consumption is around 100 watts. When it comes to gaming, Oblivion Remastered, a AAA title celebrated for its breathtaking visuals and detailed open world, it still manages to impress. The GTX 1070 handles this demanding game reasonably well, providing a solid and enjoyable experience with impressive visual quality. It averages around 50 FPS with a 1% low of 25 FPS and a 0.1% low of 15 FPS. While it generally runs smoothly, occasional stutters can be noticed during gameplay. Next, we're diving into Starfield, running at 1080p resolution on medium graphics settings with both motion blur and depth of field turned off. Let's talk performance in 2025. A common question is, how well does the GTX 1070 hold up in today's games? In modern AAA titles it's hanging in there, but just barely. You'll need to rely on upscaling and sometimes even frame generation. It technically runs the games, but the experience isn't great. The GTX 1070 is better suited for competitive esports titles like League of Legends, Counter-Strike Go and Fortnite, where it still delivers a solid performance. When it comes to 4K or maxed out settings in the latest games though, the card definitely shows its age. Still, if you're gaming at 1080p and don't mind adjusting the settings, the GTX 1070 remains a surprisingly capable GPU, even in 2025. A demanding title like Starfield sees a significant boost from frame generation. Without it, performance sits around 45 FPS. However, with FSR 3 upscaling and frame generation enabled, the average frame rate jumps to 74 FPS, with 1% lows around 60 FPS and 0.1% lows dipping to 43 FPS. The last game is Cyberpunk 2077, running at 1080p on the high settings preset. Motion blur and depth of field are disabled, while AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution 3 is set to balance mode. With AMD frame generation enabled, the game achieves an average frame rate of 117 FPS, with 1% low of 88 FPS and a 0.1% low of 44 FPS. So, is the EVGA 1070 still worth it in 2025? The short answer is yes. If you can find one at a bargain price and you're okay with dialing down the graphics settings, it's not going to crush modern AAA titles at ultra settings, but it can still deliver a decent experience if you're willing to compromise on visuals. If you enjoyed this look back at a classic GPU, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tech stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experience with the GTX 1070 in the comments. How has it held up over time for you? How does it stack up against today's newer GPUs in your opinion? Whether you've been running it for years or you're just exploring how far graphics cards have advanced, your perspective adds real value to the conversation here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. I'm David James, this was Tech Tactics. Goodbye.